All right. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. My special guest tonight is Link Lauren. He is an independent citizen journalist, but most of you probably know him from that debate on breaking points with Harry Sisson. Link, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be on a show where you can speak the truth.
Well, welcome, because we're very vocal over here. So first and foremost, Link, I want to get started with this clip from the debate, and then we'll get into, your perception. How do you think things went? What do you think could have been done differently in reference to this debate? And then I want to get into your political beliefs and feelings and what you're concerned about for particularly your generation, which is Gen Z. But I want to get started with this clip here from Breaking Points. It's titled Heated Debate, Gen Z TikTokers on Biden 2024. And I want to start at this point right here.
Young voters, number one issue at the polls. You said you're an independent, you're anti-Biden. If you're young, why should you not vote for Biden?
Well, I'm not here to tell anybody who to vote for. I think people should make their own decision.
Yeah.
Honestly, the biggest issue for me with Biden is the censorship on social media. I mean, going back to court to try and overturn the lower court's ruling to censor social media content and steer the narrative, that's just never going to sit well with me. I think his calamitous trip to Maui last week really solidified it for me. I mean, you go to Maui and give a speech about almost losing your Corvette in a small kitchen fire and making glib jokes and comments when people have lost everything. They've been torched to the ground. They can't find their families. They can't find their kids. He's cracking jokes. Then he hops on a plane to go back to his $18 million mansion in Lake Tahoe and take Pilates classes and walk around a parking lot with a smoothie. I want a transformational new leader in this country to sit in the Oval Office and really enact change. People need to see strength and see a real leader. And Joe Biden isn't giving me that. It's not giving young people that.
But Link. Okay. We'll come back to Crystal in just a second. But first and foremost, I want to get your take particularly on that question right there. How did you feel about this debate overall, especially when you made that point there about Joe Biden's disaster, I guess, in reference to Maui and the lack of urgency that it seemed like Joe Biden had to show up and support the people and then only to give like $700 per household? I want to go ahead and get started with that.
So first off, everything I said about Maui was true. I've been tracking the Maui situation since day one on my TikTok page, and you can hear from the people in Maui who are going on their local news stations. They're posting online. They're putting up signs over their businesses. They were not happy with Joe Biden's handling of the Maui situation. I mean, he was at Tom Steyer's $18 million mansion in Lake Tahoe that he was renting from him. I hope there's no tomfoolery going on there, but he was at a mansion for 13 days on vacation when the people in Maui were losing everything. Their lives were being torched to the ground. They couldn't find their kids. They couldn't find their families. So everything I said about his calamitous trip was true when he came and made jokes. Of course, I was called disingenuous and was made fun of and jumped on for raising these points. But I thought I was raising a recent topical news story, something that had just happened right before the show.
That's right. And I want to go back to Crystal's response here.
It's not just about what you're against. It's also got to be what you're for. Very likely the Republican nominee is going to be Donald Trump. Trump also censored on social media. You can see that. You can go and read the Twitter files and you'll see his administration doing a lot of the same stuff that the Biden administration was doing. In fact, the Hunter Biden laptop thing happened while Trump was still president. So let's keep that in mind. That's number.
So this is where I have to pause and I got to ask this question. Okay. It seemed like to me, the response that came from Crystal, it seemed like to me that because you said you were not for Joe Biden, she assumed that you were for Donald Trump. And I'm curious, is that the message that was delivered to the producers? Like when you were invited to come onto the show, was the message delivered that you are the Trump supporting? No. Okay. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I want people to support whoever they want to support. And if you go to my TikTok, you can see exactly how I feel. People respect the fact that I'm not owned by anybody. I don't have management that's been paid $210,000 from the DNC. I'm a real person, you know what I'm saying? And so the producers were never told that. They were told I'm an independent, common sense kind of guy who's grown really quickly on TikTok recently, built a big audience because of that, because common sense, as you know, Sabrina, is not so common these days. Also, the word debate was never used. They never used the word debate with me in any of the emails. When they invited me on the show, it was, we would love to have a link for a Gen Z panel discussion about Gen Z issues going into the 2024 election. I was blindsided by the debate. Maybe they told Harry it was going to be a debate. Not one person used the word debate with me. That's fine. We can have a debate. I went in there ready to talk about issues I cover on my page, like mental health, the suicide rate going up, the war in Ukraine, how young people feel about war versus peace, our education levels, math and reading being way too low in this country and how we shouldn't just accept that. Those are all the issues I cover on my page that I went there to talk about. And these are systemic issues that have been around for years and are probably going to be around after the next president and the next president, unfortunately. But it became very much Trump versus Biden, Link versus Harry. But the word debate, I went through the emails, was never used.
Do you feel like you were blindsided?
Oh, sure, but that's fine. I mean, I've been through so much worse than a 22-minute gaslighting on a YouTube show. So believe me, everything is totally fine. And I'm grateful to have been on. Everyone around me was like, this is such a big show. You have to go on. So I'm so grateful. Can hopefully go back on and keep it real and talk about all of those issues that I cover, because I thought it could have been such a fun, nuanced chat. You know what I'm saying? But instead, it became very Real Housewives and like Harry versus Link. The only question, you realize the only real policy question I was asked was about abortion. She only asked me about abortion. A gay guy with no kids in his 20s. Like, I've never slept with a woman. If I saw a vagina, I'd probably scream. Okay? Like, she asked me about abortion. I'm the only person who even used the word Maui and brought up Maui, a real major recent disaster. The only person who even used the word Ukraine and mentioned the Ukraine war, I was kind of shut down, right? The only person who mentioned the word border and tried to bring in and interject about the border crisis and what's happening. And then look last night at Mayor Eric Adams talking about the severity of the border situation. All the issues I tried to raise that are systemic major issues in this country, I guess I was just shut down on, but I thought it could have been great to talk about them from a Gen Z perspective.
Did you know that you would be talking to Harry Sisson? And if yes, did you know who he was?
Yes, I knew who he was, and we had to reschedule to accommodate him. So the week before, he stood us up. He didn't show up. We all sat there on Zoom waiting for him. I was in Milwaukee covering the debates, the Republican debates, and I would cover the Democratic debates, but they're not having any. So I was at the debate in Milwaukee. I got up early to do some other shows. I rushed back to the hotel to get on Zoom. I'm so excited. I'm like, I'm going on Breaking Points. Everybody says this is a big deal. We sit there. Harry never shows up. They end the Zoom call, they email, and they say, Harry wasn't able to make it. We're going to reschedule you. And I'm like, dang, this is the second time we've rescheduled, I guess, to accommodate him. So Sabrina, I went on Twitter to see if Harry was posting anything. While we were sitting on Breaking Points waiting for him, he was tweeting about how great Joe Biden is and how much he hates Trump. While we're sitting there and he's a no-show. So I tweeted back at him just to add some levity, to be cheeky, because that's just how I am. And I tweeted and I said, hey, Harry, it looks like you're awake. You're online. We're all waiting for you right now on Breaking Points, which is the hottest political podcast out right now. It's not a good look to stiff them. The tweet started to get some traction. It was retweeted by different people in the media. I got a call from the producer who threatened me, and he basically said, take the tweet down or I'm not going to have you on the show.
What?
I'm like, excuse me? I was like, what? I said, why are you jumping through hoops to accommodate a 20-year-old brat who's sitting in his dorm room tweeting about how hot Joe Biden looks in his swimsuit on the beach? Like, why are we jumping through hoops? I was on the ground at the debate, right? I thought we could have done a great debate recap from someone who was in the arena and who was actually there. I was sitting there ready to go. And he said, well, look, if you don't take the tweet down, I don't want you starting beef with Harry. I'm not going to have you on the show. So I took the tweet down because I thought, it's a big deal. Let me take the tweet down. And in my naivete, this is how Pollyanna I was. I said to him, all right, I'll take it down if it'll make for a more nuanced conversation and a more well-rounded conversation. Because at this point, I still didn't know it was a debate. I thought we were just going to talk about different issues. Like we have our ear to the ground of what Gen Z is going through. And then he tried to tell me, well, it's Harry's management. Harry's management sent him the wrong link. The management that's making over $200,000 from the DNC sent him the wrong link. And he's not that in demand. We don't see Harry on tons of other shows. It's not like they sent him the wrong show to go on. So I just thought it was interesting, but I took the tweet down, tried to be a team player. They rescheduled. I was in a different time zone. I thought, okay, I'm going to get up at 6 a.m., be ready to go for this conversation. And then I get on there and they're like, time for the debate, time for the hot debate. And I'm going, whoa, it's a debate. All right, here we go into the deep end.
Very interesting. So I do want to ask you, I'll go back to that in just a second, but I do want to ask you, what is really important to you going into 2024? You're Gen Z. When I look at you, like, you remind me of my students, because my students were Gen Z, right? So what is important to you? My students used to tell me that they were very concerned about the climate issue. They were very concerned about being able to, well, the big one was paying off their student loans, but also being able to even like afford to like buy a house or get married or start a family or anything like that. And so my students took this path of experiences. So they kind of like cued me into this, like, we have decided to put our money towards experiences. And that includes traveling instead of trying to get like the house and the family and the husband, like all that kind of stuff. Like, just because they're like, financially, we'll never be able to buy a house if things continue to wait. Now, keep in mind, I'm in Massachusetts, so it's very expensive here to buy a house. So I think that I'm curious to hear from you, being a part of the Gen Z group there. What are you really concerned about, and is there anything or any candidate, so to speak, that's already announced that you may be interested in going into 2024?
So probably no shock here. The number one issue for young people and probably any American going into the next election is inflation, the price of groceries, the price of rent. Money is the number one umbrella issue that I think all the other issues fall under. Any other issue that's brought to me almost always goes back to socioeconomics and money. I get messages from young people who say, I can't go to college. I'm stressed about going to college because how am I going to pay for it and pay for a place to live and pay for my food? I also hear from tons of young people, like you mentioned, yes, they're concerned about the climate. They want to have a great planet to live on. They're concerned about Mother Nature. But what young people tell me is, we would love to be able to worry about climate change, but we've also got to eat, okay? We've got to eat. We've got to have a place to live. So some of the young people, they tell me, my peers, my colleagues, they say, look, it would be a luxury to worry about climate and sit around talking about climate, but we're just trying to get from point A to point B and keep gas in the tank. You know what I'm saying?
I think that's really important for people to hear, because it's, if you look at the polls, the number one issue concerning people right now is the economy. And I think that's on both sides, like Democrat, Republican.
That's what was interesting. On my page, I've made tons of videos on my TikTok about why Joe Biden isn't doing so well in the polls. And I love that CNN finally today did a story about how his approval rating is low. They're 6 months behind all of us independent journalists who've been covering all of this. On my page, I do tons of videos about what Joe Biden's missing in his messaging when reaching young people. Young people message me. They always have a classmate or a friend who's been affected by drugs, been affected by fentanyl, been affected by an overdose. The suicide rate has gone up, but Breaking Points did not want to talk about any of these major issues. I mean, this is an epidemic of mental health, and nobody seemed to want to talk about them. And whenever I would try to raise valid issues, it was pretty much shut down. I was called disingenuous and basically had my character assassinated. But it pulls on my heartstrings and keeps me awake at night when I read thousands and thousands of comments. I've also been on the campaign trail with different candidates. I've been in Iowa. I've been in New Hampshire. Like I said, I was just at the debate. I really go around when I'm at different events. Before the event, I talk to undecided voters. I say, who are you feeling? What are your issues? Okay, if you have kids or grandkids, what are they going through? Economics is the number one issue. Drugs, a close second or third.
I hear you. So if you looked at the candidates right now, like, obviously you're not feeling Joe Biden. I'm not feeling Joe Biden. I think the majority of people that watch this
73%, I think 73% of all Americans, and it's more than that. Okay, if CNN is saying 73% of Americans, it's probably way more than that, who disapprove of Joe Biden.
Yeah, it's a very real, and that's the thing. That doesn't really include many people from your generation, because the thing is, a lot of times Gen Z are not polled. I'm a millennial. I've never been polled in a political election in this country.
Well, I'll say this also, Sabrina, you and I, we don't have fancy focus groups or polling. We go off of what we hear from the people, what we read in our comments, what we hear from our friends and family when we go out into the real world, right? So we have our finger on the pulse of what's happening ahead of time before all these fancy polls and focus groups and internal polling come out. We know already what's happening. We're months ahead when the mainstream media decides to talk about these major issues. We already know. We don't need polls to tell us because we're living it in America, right?
That's right. That's a very important. You are very smart, Link. That is a very important point to make, because we do hear those. Like, I hear it from people. You know, I'm on the ground. I hear from people in the street. I hear from people in the neighborhood. I hear from people from so that is my original polling, not. Right. You know, these focus groups that they have out there.
Something else also that's come up in the comments, and I was the one who addressed this on the show. People say, oh my God, they're both spoiled brats who went to NYU, right? On breaking points, and they could have had a more well-rounded panel. I would love to share more of my life story growing up, living with my mom. She always taught me how to hustle, make it work, get through, make whatever you want to have happen. So I'd love to tell more of my story too. And I understand people think, who's this NYU kid? He went to NYU. What does he know about the real world? But I promise you guys, I have a pretty good grasp on how people are feeling 100%.
Well said. I'm going to go back to this for just a second because I wanted to finish this conversation and then we'll come back.
For one. Number two, I mean, in terms of hurricane response, he was, very late in terms of his response to Hurricane Maria.
He took 13 days. He showed up for 2 hours.
And go back. Go back and look how Donald Trump did.
It took 13 days, and then he was back in the Pilates studio.
My question to you directly, and then I'll get Harry in. My question to you directly is Trump better than Biden? You know, would you, if that's your choice, Trump v. Biden, or would you vote third party? Like, what would be your choice in that situation and why?
For sure. So the thing about American politics is you never know who's going to emerge. I mean, look at how many candidates were on the stage last week, right? So I'm going to keep my options open and see who I feel in November of 2024.
But let's be real. This is what it's likely coming down to.
I'm probably the most real person. Let's get real, Crystal.
Is like 50% ahead of everybody else. You know, Nikki Haley gained like 3 points after this debate. It's not enough to overcome.
But if you guys have a nail in the coffin, but Crystal, if you have a nail in the coffin with the trial, then isn't it sealed up?
I'm just trying to figure out, where do you actually stand? Like, do you actually think Trump is better than Biden? If that's your choice, are you a Trump guy or are you on the fence? Are you looking at a third party candidate?
We also never said anything about nails in the coffin.
Yeah,
just to be clear.
Yeah, no, we've never said that. Definitely. So anyway, where do you stand if that's your choice? Where do you stand if that's your choice?
Honestly, traveling, getting to know these candidates, I really like some other candidates, and I'm looking to see who's going to emerge in November of 2024.
Okay.
Okay, let me stop there and come from that, because again, rhetoric.
I stand by exactly what I said.
Yeah, because I continue to hear this rhetoric: is Trump better than Biden? Is Biden better than Trump? And I think, and I'll talk about this again later on tonight when we get to when I get to the Jimmy Dore segment. But it's just, the reality is they're both corrupt, and this is what I try to get across to my audience. Like, why are we trying to pigeonhole people into these two parties as if this is our only option? This is all that we can do. And I feel like it's shutting out other opportunities, whether that is a third party, whether that is independent. And there are people doing both. But also, I want people to really understand that if we're going to bring about real change in this country, it's not just going to come from electoral politics. Yes, there is legislation that needs to pass, but you also need organizing. You need community activism. You need boots on the ground to get things done. And I've seen grassroots activists actually get things done on the local level. So what worries me is that going into 2024, I do feel like I'm hearing it all over again, just like I heard it in 2020 and 2016. I feel like people are still looking for a hero. And what I want to get across to people is that no one person is coming to save you. And I feel like people are doing it again. They think that, it's either going to be Biden or it's going to be Trump that's going to rescue us. And at the end of the day, we have to help each other. But I want to get your opinion about that as well.
Yeah, so my whole thing is what I told Crystal, Sagar, and Harry is I'm an independent new media journalist whose medium happens to be TikTok. I want to follow the entire primary, the entire general election, just like everybody else, along with my audience. I've interviewed some of the candidates. I would love to interview more. I've gotten to Marianne, Vivek, RFK Jr. I'm trying to get to the rest at the next debate. I'd love to talk to Cornel West. I'd love to talk to other candidates as well. You've got the Democratic Party, Republican Party, Green Party. You've got the No Labels Party. Everybody deserves a shot to be heard. That's what makes our democracy so incredible. And I think people forget that. And Crystal is very much Biden is our savior. Biden is our only hope. We have to vote for Biden, but the data doesn't reflect that. Americans really aren't feeling that. And I say the exact same thing you do, which is he ain't coming to save us. Biden is not going to save us. It hasn't happened yet. He will go out and give a speech about something and do something completely antithetical to that. He will say, I am the climate president, and then go approve things that are totally antithetical to that statement. So Biden's not coming along to save us. We also need term limits. We need cognitive testing. I think people like Dianne Feinstein, Mitch McConnell, they're also getting in, their talking points. Mitch McConnell, he's had 2 medical episodes. His first day back, he goes and gives a speech about how we need to support Ukraine more. So he got his talking points between the medical episode and today. So I'm not here to tell anybody how to vote. I thought it was really interesting to try and interrogate me into who I'm voting for when it's not even November of 2023, let alone November of 2024. And I'll say this too. Look what happened in 2016 with Hillary and Trump. Hillary's campaign will tell you they thought they had it in a bag. It was all wrapped up. They were just going to sail into the election. Well, we have this thing called October surprises that I know everybody has heard about, right? They had one October surprise after another, and Hillary Clinton lost. So we're not even at October of 2023, let alone October of next year. So I will let people know how I'm feeling when we get to that point. And I hope people respect that I want to go along with the primary and the general and cover all of it just like everybody else.
That's right. I want to remind people, let's all remember that Michael Bloomberg jumped into the race very late. Mm-hmm. So you never know.
What's funny is on that show too, they showed us a poll and then we were supposed to talk about data that they showed us from a poll. And then I brought up a poll and they said that polls aren't really accurate. So we just never really know what to go off of. Sometimes the candidates that are far ahead right now, they're behind later. Sometimes a scandal comes out and it tanks someone's campaign. Nowadays, a scandal probably helps your campaign. But I want to follow along and see like everybody else. I also want to have a chance to interview and ask a few questions to all of the candidates for my TikTok before I make my mind up. And I think that's fair to say. And I know that doesn't work for everybody, right? They're nosy. I'm nosy too. People say, who are you voting for right now? And I'm like, we don't know what's going to happen in American politics.
Yeah, I feel like it wasn't always this way, like pre-Trump. Like, I don't remember people asking me like who, as many people asking me like, who are you supporting? Who are you voting for? And I don't remember people telling people, just voluntarily telling people who they supported either. But I do feel like ever since 2016, it seems like it's more common now.
Well, it's also because politics in our country has become so polarized. It's like you used to be able to sit down with your neighbor who felt one way and then have another neighbor who felt this one. Everybody could get along, agree to a disagree, which is what I always say on my page. I'm like, look, you don't have to agree, you can disagree, but I welcome an open dialogue from everyone across the spectrum. But nowadays, if you say one thing people disagree with, whether it's a culture war story or politics, they'll try to dox you, cancel you, call your work. Like, it's really insane. And so that's probably what you're thinking of right now. It's just that polarization.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I want to ask you, you're still in college. What year are you?
No, I just graduated last year.
Just graduated.
Right.
How do you feel about the future in reference to job security? Because I remember when I graduated undergrad, the economy was in the pits. I feel like you're right again. The economy was in the pits. People are graduating now. The economy is doing poorly. How do you feel about job security in the future? And do you see yourself as someone that is going to stay in one place? And I ask that because I noticed a lot more Gen Z generation is more willing to move around to find these job opportunities.
Right.
How do you feel about job security? And is that something that you're concerned about as well?
So I recently left New York. My lease was up. I thought, I don't love where this city is going. I don't love the leadership in this city. And I feel like I want to spread my wings and go someplace else. All I lived in was Dallas in New York. And so I wanted to move back to Texas, figure out my next steps. And that's what I've been doing. But I've also been traveling on the campaign trail. And luckily, I do well on TikTok. I also do social media and marketing for other brands. Okay. So I've been traveling. I got to figure out where I'm going to put my roots down and where I'm going to land right now. But I am kind of enjoying figuring it out. And that's kind of the fun of being young, honestly.
Yeah, I remember those days.
But in speaking to job security, it's not just that young people are having a hard time finding jobs, let's say in an office, a 9-to-5 job. That job is not enough for them to afford a starter home or starter apartment or to have equity in anything. And we're going to get to a point where we have an entire generation who owns nothing. And I've been there. I lived in New York with the prices. I packed up and I left. But we have a generation who's going to have equity and nothing. Whereas our parents' generation and older generation, they might own a home that accrues in value and they have that nest egg and that asset. Young people are having a hard time even getting the financing to be shown homes and shown apartments. So this is a really major issue. And I keep raising the alarm, and I hope I don't seem like an alarmist. All of these systemic issues right now that are going on, they're going to come to a head in 5 and 10 years. We're going to really see the repercussions of not handling this and not addressing these issues pretty soon. And it doesn't matter who the president is, these things are going to come and go. It's going to take a real transformational leader to fix these things.
100%. And I'm so glad that you said that, because this is something I've been trying to explain to people, is that it will eventually, if things do not improve, it will eventually get to a point where people won't own anything, because you have to have a down payment to purchase a house. Unless you get a VA loan, you're part of the military and you don't have to put anything down. But most people are going to have to put down a down payment. And what I've noticed is over the years, as students are graduating from college, they're further and further away from getting that opportunity to have that down payment, because these employers, they are paying less. I remember, and I worked at BU, MIT, and Harvard, and I remember when students were graduating from the business school at BU and they would get like a starting salary of like maybe $65,000. It's not like that anymore, even with the masters. So I think that's what people have to understand. That's why these kids are still living like with 4 roommates or 5 roommates, or they're having to leave and move back in with their parents. Like, something has to give here.
And there's also no shame in that. I mean, you have to do the best with the cards you're dealt in life. And this is the card that our generation's been dealt. But also, there are people all the way up to baby boomers who are really struggling financially, who thought they were going to be retired by now. So this is a real major issue from 8 to 80. We've got issues going on in this country. And it's naive to think that these issues are going to be fixed all by one president. You know, like you said, we got to do grassroots. You got to get out there. That's what I try to do on my page, is have conversations. Okay, what can we do to fix this on a local level, state level, city level, town level? So it's not all going to happen with the next president or the 4 years after that.
That's right. Even like different states have different like income tax levels. They have different like sales tax. Like it all depends on where you live. There's some states in this country that have no income tax, no sales tax, that kind of thing. So
yeah, like Wyoming, Texas, Florida, best place for taxes, but then it's really hard to live there for some people. Then you have to move. But you see a lot of people moving back to my home state of Texas from California, from New York, also because of the crime. I mean, nonviolent crime, I think, is up double digits in almost every major California city. I mean, this is according to CNN. So for all the super liberals out there, this is according to CNN. But people are moving. They're making the hard choice to pack up their families and move and find new doctors and new schools. So our country, I feel, and tell me if I'm wrong, Sabrina, I feel like our country is really in a moment of growing pains. And I hate to use a buzzword, but it's like an inflection point in our country where we're either going to go down this road and get better and go toward a more prosperous country, or we're going to go down a dark path. Like, we really are in a growing pains era of our country.
Yeah, it's interesting. My grandparents said the same thing about the 60s, like the mid 60s to like mid 70s. They felt like the same way that this country was going through like growing pains. And I feel like, well, yeah, like with our generation, especially ever since the pandemic, it's been even more difficult, I think. But I think that's why it's important to hear from, you know, younger people like yourself. We really need to hear more from people who are part of that Gen Z generation. It used to be people used to focus a lot on millennials, but I think a lot of us have gotten to the point now where we're up in the age bracket now where a lot of us that are millennials, where they don't think about us that much anymore.
Well, also what I'll say is this too. we really need to have a deep dive and a hearing on what really went down during the lockdowns and COVID, okay? Because there was a new billionaire, every 26 hours during COVID, more wealth was transferred to the top 1% than during any other moment in American history. I think over 3 million small businesses closed during the pandemic, but Amazon got richer and Amazon's investors got richer. So also kids going home to do remote learning during lockdowns, that really tanked our math and reading levels. We had teachers who left the profession. Now the classroom sizes have ballooned. I mean, these are all issues that should be the number one issue on every newspaper, every show. But as I go back to breaking points, they want to have the same old debate, Trump versus Biden. You know, they don't want to talk about the real issues. It's Trump versus Biden, election 2024.
And the real issues, and these are really good points, because there are still teachers that are leaving the profession right now.
Because they're underpaid, the classroom sizes have gotten too big. They also are trying to reconcile with COVID and COVID coming back and masking, lockdowns, kids learning behind plexiglass. Schools really aren't that safe. You have weapons and everything like that. I've been saying we need the immediate death penalty for anyone who opens fire in a school. I am not going to move on that. These are all major issues. And for some reason, the mainstream media wants to focus on more flashy things. But these are the things that we reconcile with every single day because we're out here in the real world. We're not living in the swamp or in a television studio.
Yeah, I think it's important. I don't agree with you on the death penalty. I'm not for the death penalty, but I'm
from Texas. I'm a little more gung-ho on these things, but no, I just have seen, I think it's my generation, just seen too many school shootings. And I think about potentially having kids someday and what it would look like to have to turn them over and send them to school. So no, I understand that. We're not going to agree on that for sure. And I can't see the chat right now. I'm sure the chat is calling me out. I love you guys in the chat.
No, I think also too, when we talk about like the real issues that people are facing, I think for people who are not on disability may not understand that when things do increase in this economy, when we have inflation, when the grocery prices are higher and they continue to increase every week, at least where I live, people that are on disability have a set amount that is sent to them by the state. Yes, I believe they got a little bit of increase from what I understand from people, but still they are on a fixed income. And for those who have 100% disability and they're not allowed to work, there's no way for them, it seems like, to get extra money. So we talk a lot about the workers, and I think it's also important that we recognize those that just physically cannot work and they are stuck in a system that is not designed to benefit them in any way, shape, or form.
Well, 100%. I mean, as a country, we're only as strong as our most at-risk group. You know what I'm saying? As those people, we really can't be a well-rounded country if we're not reaching back and helping everybody. And what I've been saying on my page for about the past year is everyone in this country should be able to live a nice life if they're a good person, if they're willing to work. So I'm totally in agreement with you, Sabrina.
Awesome. Well, Link, thank you so much for coming on. But before you go, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter and TikTok at It's Link Lauren. I put it right here. And Sabrina, I just want to say I adore you. I adore your show. We're not going to agree on everything, but that's how media should be. We should be able to sit here and agree, disagree, and then still kick it and be friends. So I don't know why people have forgotten that, but thank you so much for having me on. Shout out to your audience. I really think you're like the future of media. Your page is growing. So congratulations to all of that.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.